Radio 91.3 KDKR Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, and 91.3 KYJC Commerce. Portions of KDKR's daily programming do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, are you eligible for student loan forgiveness, and when should you expect to receive it? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today, and you know I do appreciate it. Well, there's a lot going on today with student loan debt and college admission. Here to make sense of it all is college admissions expert and Prudent Money contributor John Hupalo. Hey, John, welcome to Prudent Money.
Bob, great to be back with you. Good afternoon.
I tell you, the wheels just start to come off the truck when anytime they sign something there in Washington, and you probably saw this coming. I certainly didn't. But passed the I don't know if you call it a law, but the student loan forgiveness, and now things have kind of spun out of control. There are lawsuits, potential delays. Talk about what's going on with all that.
Well, first of all, you're an optimist by thinking the wheels were on the truck to begin with.
Good point.
I don't think they were, but that's a whole different story. But you're right. When you think that there's some stability, meaning they passed the program, we've gotten through all the politics. Remember, for years, like literally since 2016, we've been talking, you and I have been talking about student loan forgiveness. Is it going to be $50,000? Is it going to be all? They finally figured out, okay, it's going to be $10,000. Biden came out with this plan, $10,000 for most borrowers, but if you had Pell Grants, you might be eligible for another $10,000. So they finally figured out, okay, we're going to forgive up to $20,000. They figured out who could be involved with that, and this happened the mid part of the summer. And then, like you said, the wheels just fell off the truck with all kinds of crazy things, lawsuits. So, Bob, I really appreciate you giving me a heads up sometimes about what you want to talk about, because I went just now to look at these lawsuits. And when I tell you this, your jaw will be on the ground, but there are 6 suits filed. We understand that we're going to have some lawsuits, but I can't believe, frankly, that one of the suits that's going to the Supreme Court, and it was filed yesterday with the Supreme Court, is by 2 borrowers whose loans are going to be canceled under the program. So you might say to me, John, why would 2 borrowers who are going to get rid of $10,000 or $20,000 in debt possibly want to sue to stop this program?
I can't wait.
And the answer to this, Bob, is that because there are 6 or so states out there that would actually be allowed to tax the forgiven amounts, these 2 borrowers are saying, you know what, that's going to create an excessive tax liability for me, so I don't want you to forgive my loans. Can you believe that?
Well, let's do the numbers out loud. Because they've deferred these loans. They couldn't pay for the loans out of cash because they don't have the money.
Right.
So they can't pay for the taxes.
Right. That's exactly right. So they're saying that. So the Department of Education, to try to get around this little suit, said, "Oh, by the way, if you want to opt out of this program, you can do that." And so the borrower said, "Okay, well, tell me how." And that's when the department got really silent, because they didn't have an opt-out mechanism. They said you can do it. It's kind of like I'm trying to call the IRS. My poor father, deceased now for 2 years. He's owed a tax refund to his estate of like $1,500 something. But every time I call there, they say, "Oh, he's due a refund," and then they hang up on me. I can't talk to anyone. So it's the same thing with the government, where they say, "Oh, we got this great program. If you want to get in or get out, do this or that," and then they don't make it actually available. So that's one of them. So one of the little wheels on the bus that fell off was this idea that a number of states will actually tax the benefits, And if the kids, like you're saying, they can't afford to make the student loan payment, they're not going to be able to make the tax liability. So that's one thing. Another one, which was filed on behalf of one of the state agencies that actually owns some of these student loans. It turns out that the state agency that was named in the suit never actually authorized their name to be associated with this suit. So the suit was dismissed because they didn't actually want to be included. So it was one of these political suits. And now there are three others that have been dismissed on some other kinds of legal procedure, and they're going to be subject to appeal. But there is one, and this is really, I think, the punchline for the rest of what we want to talk about. There is one that was filed a little bit ago, and they filed some briefs 2 weeks ago, and as a result of that filing, the judge said, you know what, we're going to put a stay on this program. And what that means for all of us who are not lawyers is that they said to the Biden administration, you can go out there and collect all these applications for loan forgiveness, but you can't forgive one loan until these lawsuits are settled.
Oh, my gosh.
So can you imagine that? So, and who knows how long that will take, right? So they said, we're going to give emergency procedures here. So they had the lawyers get all their written briefs together. They were put in a week or two ago. And as of 15 minutes ago, when I checked to make sure there wasn't a decision, there hasn't been a decision on what's going to happen with that. So right now, 20 or 22 million of these student loan borrowers who think they're going to have their loans forgiven sometime soon put their applications in, and now they're just like in the resting bin, I guess is the way to think about it.
So I assume then that the Supreme Court is going to take this and get this done quickly. So so I mean, how do you think this turned? How the end result of all this? What do you think it is?
So I think what will happen in the end, by the way, one of the Supreme Court justices turned down an appeal 3 or 4 weeks ago and said, you know what, I don't want to deal with this, just dismissed it out of hand. So that one's out. But this other one was filed just a week or two ago, is live, and that's the one that they're going to act on. And then the one that was filed yesterday. So there are a whole bunch of these things. But I think at the end of the day, the administration will probably come out on top, meaning that their program to forgive loans will be upheld, and students will get the $10,000 or $20,000 of loan relief that they are expecting. I don't know what the time frame will be. I would think, though, that the courts will want to deal with this pretty quickly. Though, by the way, the whole rub of this is that it's a political battle. It has been since 2016, and it continues to this day. Republicans are suing. Democrats are crying foul. Republicans are saying that the very nature of this relief program comes under what was the HEROES Act back in 2003. That was right after 9/11, and they were trying to do a lot of things to try to provide relief to folks. And in that HEROES Act, it said that the Secretary of Education has the power to forgive loans during specific periods, such as war or national emergencies. And so the president now, Biden, says, well, COVID was a national emergency, and therefore we can forgive these loans. So that's the battle that's going on. And we're laughing, but, I turn my hand. I have, kids, and you do too, of sort of like the college, just after college age. And, my daughters, when they read this, and they're, well, wait a minute, should I pay my student loan? Should I not pay my student loan? What is this all about? The messages are just absolutely terrible that are being delivered to a whole generation of kids.
Oh, it's so true. And the thing that just blows my mind, John, is the fact that you and I have talked about through the year or so better solutions to this, with the interest rates, making it easier to pay, taking out some of the consequences for not paying, whatever. But pulling an arbitrary number out of the air, $10,000, and saying we're just going to forgive this makes absolutely no sense.
No, it doesn't. And, when they first announced the program, they said that there would be 40-something million borrowers who would be eligible for this. And then one of the very first lawsuits that popped up said, well, wait a minute. There are two kinds of direct student loans, federal government loans. Some that are actually owned by the Department of Education, and then some are privately held, like these state-based entities. that own some of these loans. And so the state-based entities popped up and said, well, wait a minute, you can't go and forgive loans that you don't owe. So we're going to file this suit to stop the whole program. So the federal government, Biden administration, pretty quickly made a correction back in early September and said, sorry, 8 million or 10 million of you folks who thought we're going to be able to give you your loan. We can't do that because we actually don't owe your loan, so you're not going to be involved in this program anymore. So you said it right at the beginning. The wheels were coming off right at the beginning of the whole announcement. It came very late. It wasn't particularly well thought out. And even if it were well thought out, there was an ambush coming on the other side because it's become a huge political football. And again, the sad part is there are students in the middle of this whole shootout, and they're trying to figure out just what are they supposed to do. And there's no clear answer, quite honestly.
Let's talk a little bit about eligibility and who qualifies. I'm assuming none of that has changed.
No, none of that has changed. That's exactly right. You're eligible for $10,000 of debt cancellation if your income is less than $125,000 per year, and that's $250,000 for joint filers. And then there's this additional $10,000 of debt forgiveness if the borrower received a Pell Grant. And Pell Grants, Bob, are made to students in the sort of the lowest socioeconomic buckets, and meaning that they're disadvantaged significantly. So these kids are getting, quite a break with the Pell Grants. And the administration basically came back and said, look, if you needed more than the free money we gave you in the Pell Grant, you had these student loans, we'll forgive up to $10,000 of your loans as well. So, those kids would get $10,000 for the Pell, $10,000 for the regular program. So they're up to $20,000 of debt forgiveness for those most disadvantaged students. And I think a lot of people say, look, if you're going to give free money away, giving it to those who actually need it is a really good idea. So that's where that came from. And also, it's good to know that this program is for all loans that were dispersed. That means that they were made before June 30th of this year. So all these kids who took out loans for this current school year, they're not eligible for this program. It's only for loans that were made before June 30, 2022, and that includes these plus loans, the loans that are made to parents. So they would be eligible for up to $10,000 of relief as well.
So tell me this, and nice segue into my next question. The Parent Plus loans obviously taken out by a parent. So you could have a student loan in the parent's name, and then you could have a student loan in the student's name. I'm assuming they're going to count all that as one and not two.
No, they'll count it by borrower. So if the student has, and remember, the student can only borrow $5,500 freshman year, then $6,500 sophomore, and $7,500 for each the junior and the senior year. So they're under their own separate program. Away from that, entirely away from that, is the parent program. And the parent program is the one where if I took a plus loan for my daughter, it's my debt. It has nothing to do with her. I can't transfer it to her. It's mine forever until it's paid, or now in this case, until it's forgiven. So up to $10,000 of my debt plus $10,000 of my daughter's debt could be forgiven as well.
Well, that's a pretty significant when you think about it, because I don't know the numbers. You might know the numbers of how many of those Parent Plus loans are taken out, but that could really add up.
That's a big number, and that's why the estimate of the total amount of loan forgiveness here ranges between $300 and $350 billion. These are very, very large numbers of the 1.7 or so trillion that's trillion that's outstanding.
So talk a little bit about what steps that someone needs to take. I'm assuming that the government agencies have reached out to each student loan borrower. But what do you have to do at this point to make sure that you're in the line to get the loan?
Yeah, the most important thing to do is to call a student loan servicer to make sure that you're in the line, and there are two ways to get in the line. One is that there was automatic eligibility for those who had certain kinds of loans, And again, it's really just important to check with your servicer or go online, and there'll be a notation on that loan that this would be eligible or not. The second way is to file an application for this forgiveness, and the number came out a few weeks ago that something like 20 or 22 million borrowers used that application in the first month, and I think your jaw hit the ground. I know mine did. How in the world could 20 million have filed that application? But apparently they did, because that's the number that's reported, and if there were any issue with that, we would have seen articles on the other side. So I take it at face value that about half of those who were eligible for the program actually applied for it immediately. They were expecting, according to the Department of Education, to be able to forgive those loans within 4 to 6 weeks. But, of course, now the judge has put the stay-in process, so we'll have to see when the loans are actually forgiven.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know, I do appreciate it. John Hupalo comes on once a month to talk everything college and student loans. And let me make sure everybody knows your website. MyCollegeCorner.com is a great resource to go to. I was having lunch with a friend of mine today, and he was just talking about the craziness of this time of year. He's got a senior in the house, about just like myself, just about to start going to college next fall, and just everything that's due right now and the stress that can cause. Yeah, I was trying to think of different scenarios. Let's say a student paid off their loan this year, before the announcement, but within months of the announcement. Is there any way that they might qualify?
Yeah, that's really interesting, Bob. And I think the answer to that, as best I can tell, is no, that there had to be an outstanding balance, not the ability to go and claw back for balances that were paid. Of course, the other side of that is that there have been no payments due and no interest accruing on these loans for almost 3 years now.
That's true.
So, and unfortunately, this is a place where, you know, someone like me who's a finance person and, you know, says you should do what's right. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was telling people you really ought to pay these down right now because it's dollar for dollar off your loan principal. And so now, of course, you know, if the students are making less than $125,000, or the graduates are making less than $125,000, that probably wasn't great advice. The only good news of that, Bob, is only something like 11% of the borrowers who could have been making payments during that period were actually doing so. My advice, which turns out not to have been the best advice, would not have harmed very many, quite honestly. And again, this is only $10,000 of debt relief. And most of the borrowers, the average borrower indebtedness now is something on the order of $35,000. So the reality is it was probably a really good idea for people to pay that down, but those who paid are not eligible for a sort of clawback on that or reimbursement.
So here's another complication. You've got January 1st, 2023, when student loan borrowers have to start making payments again. And, you know, how will a borrower know if their student loan payment reflects that given debt? I mean, is the payment going to go down? I mean, or have you even heard any guidance on that?
Yeah, the student loan servicers are in the process of going through that, and I don't know precisely what the answer is. So again, I think it's worth a call to the student loan servicer, or go up on the website, or go into the loan. They may have, you know, on your loan account itself, they may have a new recalibrated balance. But my sense is what they were going to do is take the forgiveness off the top of the loan, and then go back down and either recalibrate that payment based on the new amount, or, as you're saying, just allow that loan to pay down that much faster. I don't know how they settle that.
So let's talk a little bit about another big story and what's going on with the Supreme Court. Very busy when it comes to college-related issues and cases, and this is a big one. Talk a little bit about what's happening with affirmative action in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, this is another huge issue, as you're saying, and there was an argument this week at the Supreme Court, apparently 5 hours of argument at the Supreme Court on this very issue, and the question really revolves around this idea of affirmative action and how colleges are using it to build out their class. And some groups, and Asian students in particular, say that they may be discriminated against by the affirmative action because the reality is that colleges are saying, we want our class to be diverse, and we want to see this kind of a picture, meaning racially males and females, and I'll say other gender identifying. However they do that now, I've got to be careful because I don't really know. But they're trying to get the gender right. They're trying to get all the athletes in the right way, and all the rest of the composition of the class. And so what Harvard was doing, and others are doing it as well, but Harvard is a big name school, so they're named in these suits. But what they're saying is, what's happening is that if you're an Asian student, I'm just making this as an example, and you're an Asian student and you were the valedictorian in your class, and you had, instead of perfect board scores of 1,600, you had 1,500, and that might have been, just a great application. But there's another student from another population, maybe, they're a little different. They come with the same profile, and they're going to get in, and this other student's not going to get in. And they're saying that's because we want more of the second class of students to fill out our class than more, in my example, of the Asian students. And the reason I say the Asian students is that they've been very vocal and identified in these suits as the ones who are feeling discriminated against. So it's a very complicated issue.
No doubt.
It's been around for 25 years now. There was another decision back 25 years ago where they thought that these kinds of racial quota-type systems would potentially maybe be done away with in 25 years. They were willing to keep them for a short period of time. So that's going to be the real issue here. How is the court going to decide that prior precedent?
So, but this is a case that will could change everything depending on how they rule.
It could change everything, but I think, Bob, for a limited number of schools. Most of the schools in the country are almost open admission. Lots of the state schools, it's really the sort of most selective, highly selective, I'm going to say the Ivies and maybe some of the other, top tier schools where they're really, just think, they have, yields, meaning the number of students they take in, often around 5% of all the applicants. They only accept 5% of all the kids who apply. So I think it's those schools, the most selective schools, are the ones that are under the microscope on this. So, generally across the country, is it going to affect most students? I'd say probably not, but it will definitely affect how the composition of some of those very highly competitive schools, what those classes are going to look like.
Great information, John. Lots going on, and we'll look forward to talking to you next month. MyCollegeCorner.com is John's website, and a great website full of lots of resources. I didn't finish telling my story about my friend at lunch today. I told him, you can go to MyCollegeCorner.com and get more information on how to do a lot of this. And you do have a lot of great information at that site. John, always great to talk to you.
Bob, great talking to you. Be well.
You
and happy
well.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I can't believe it's November, but
I can't either. Be well. Thank you.
Okay, take care. God bless. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. I was just sitting here thinking about this $10,000 forgiveness program and just how simple it looks on the cover and how complicated it is when you peel back the layers and see everything that has to happen, all the little details that are there. And we'll see how it turns out, but interesting stuff. This is Bob Brooks. You got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.